strong here around the Manicourt circuit, as has been Michael van der Mark. Remember his win in the wet here a year or two ago, but another rider to suffer a couple of spills in yesterday's race. I know he was a bit shaken up after those spills. We know he won't continue with BMW in World Superbike next season as well. It's looking possible that he could stay in the BMW family but move into other championships, as we heard earlier in the week. But Michael hoping for better fortunes here today.
Yeah, certainly. And for Mikey, first rider to leave the pits, 2 crashes in yesterday's race. The second one at turn 3 was a pretty big one. We bumped into him on the way out of the track yesterday, and he's at least looking forward to this race. He saw in yesterday's race he could make a good start, give himself a chance of being able to fight for a top 5 finish, or top 5 position in those early laps, and that's what he'll be expecting during the course of this afternoon's races as well.
So as the riders leave the pits, then we ride on board with Danilo Petrucci as we get ready for this 10-minute morning warm-up session. Petrucci currently 3rd in the championship, looking to consolidate that today on the Barney Ducati, but he'll be moving on up to take Toprak Razgatlioglu's seat at BMW, of course, next year. He'll be looking to up his confidence ahead of that. The Italian, very big shoes to fill indeed, and it comes with Toprak's recommendation as well.
Yeah, and certainly for Petrucci, we know that it's going to be a big challenge for him. What's going to be interesting to see is who he ends up with as his crew chief as well. Obviously 2 riders at BMW changing for next year. Marcus Eschenbacher, 1 crew chief for Van der Mark, Phil Marin another for Toprak, and be interesting to see how BMW shake up the technical group as well for next season. But certainly with Danilo, the expectation is he'll be able to come in and be able to do a good job. He's not going to be able to come in and do what Toprak has done, but that's where BMW will need to take a realistic approach to what they can expect from him in year 1.
Obviously, the biggest news of the summer break is the greatest of all time, 6-time champion Jonathan Rea announcing his retirement from, well, at least full-time competition. We don't know for certain what Jonathan's plans are for next year. He will not continue full-time in the FIM Superbike World Championship. It's going to be very interesting to see what his definite plans are for next year, isn't it?
Yeah, I spoke to Johnny yesterday after the race, and he was really disappointed with what had happened down into turn 13, just where Andrea Iannone is coming through here now. Iannone was overtaken by Petrucci, and then there was a bit of contact between them, and it set off a little bit of a chain reaction. Jari Montella was coming through to try and attack on Jonathan Rea, and then he ended up trying to come through on everyone, and he's been given a double long lap penalty for today's race just because he was the instigator of it. Alvaro Bautista tried to set the bike up ever so slightly, and then Javi Vierge, we can see here on 97, he tried to hold his bike on that inside line, and he ended up crashing as well, and Bautista out of it too. So it ended up where this chain reaction all seemed to involve all 6 riders, and unfortunately 5 of them ended up on the deck. For Petrucci, he was still able to come away with a top 5 finish.
Javi Vierge, meanwhile, on the Honda, has had a couple of spills this weekend. He came down in FP2 on Friday as well, escaping without any major damage. But he's another rider whose career for 2026 a bit up in the air with Honda at the moment. We don't know for certain if he's continuing with the factory Honda team.
Yeah, unfortunately it looks less and less likely that Javi's going to have a seat there at Honda. It looks like Chantra is going to be the rider that comes in, and still yet to be confirmed by Honda, and they've tried to make sure that Javi knows that he might have an option there, but at a certain point Javi needs to be able to make his decision as well, and unfortunately for him the seats are just filling up now, and he might be in play for that second BMW seat. That also seems like it's a little bit unlikely now. It seems like that's gone a little bit quiet lately. So for Vierge, it's tough to see where he lands for next season, unfortunately. He's been a good Superbike rider, he's been solid, and certainly if the choice was between him and Chantra, you'd expect that Javi would get better results than Chantra on the bike next year, just because of his experience with the Pirellis, the Fireblade and the Championship. And it's a tough one for Javi Vierge because he's outperformed Iker Lecuona, and he's been the top Honda over the last few years.
Riding on board momentarily there with Andrea Locatelli on the Pata Yamaha. Now, he was one of the stars of yesterday. He crashed in Superpole during the morning, had to start from the back of the grid, having not set a time, and helped by attrition, admittedly, he managed to charge his way through up into P5. So the Yamaha clearly on the pace this weekend.
Yeah, and certainly for Locatelli, that crash during the course of the Superpole session put him to the back of the field and left him with an awful lot of work to do during the course of race 1, but he did well to come through, and he's going to have to do it in the Superpole race as well, and that's where it gets really tricky to get yourself into those top 9 positions.
Yes, indeed, going to be a very interesting Superpole race coming up in just a couple of hours' time later this morning. So we're just coming up to the halfway point of this morning warm-up session. Toprak Razgatlioglu has done the quickest lap, 1:35.7, but time's not really relevant in this session. This is all about shaking down the machine and getting the setup right, ready for the Super Pole race coming up later on this morning. The track temperature will be much higher by then, of course.
Yeah, sometimes teams will make a bit of a change from yesterday into today's races, and they'll use the warm-up session to give them that bit of time. But it also means that you're doing it whenever track conditions are very different, where 20 degrees track temperature could be close to 40 by the time we get underway for race 2 this afternoon. And for all the riders, they'll know that it's about trying to give yourself those opportunities to see what you're able to take from today and then build into this afternoon's races as well.
Mentioning Andrea Iannone as we were earlier on, it must have been a very big frustration for him to be involved in that collision on lap 1 of race 1 yesterday. I was talking to the Go 11 team after free practice on Friday. Andrea was really frustrated. He couldn't get the setup, particularly the front end of the bike. He wasn't happy with it at all through free practice. The team were making changes all the way through. Then suddenly it came right late on in the Tissot Super Pole session. He lined up P5 on the grid and was fired up ahead of that, and then it all came apart again on lap 1. So an up and down weekend quite literally for Andrea Iannone.
Yeah, it has been tough for Iannone and for the Go 11 team, and they're just trying to find their solutions for what's been a pretty difficult season overall. But Iannone qualified well and then was involved in that first lap crash. So the Super Pole race means he goes from the second row of the grid and he gives himself a chance to be able to come away with something.
Rose brothers line astern there. They're currently second and third in the times in this session behind Toprak Razgatlioglu. It's Jonathan Ray currently in 4th place, so he's got the pace this weekend again. We didn't get to see from the Yamaha its true potential in yesterday's race. So many leading players involved in that pile-up on the first lap, and I must say as well, full credit to the marshals and the other on-track officials for getting the track cleared in time. I was certain that race was going to be red flagged yesterday, so we must show respect to our marshals here for getting that incident cleared very quickly. Yeah,
and the incident that we saw, I thought at one stage that it was very likely we would have that red flag. It turns out that once Bautista was able to get started again, Vieira was able to get started, Ray got his bike going, suddenly it was a lot easier to clear it up rather than having those 5 bikes all waiting to be moved.
Bulliger now goes up into 3rd in the times, in this session. Iannone looking to improve as well, just getting the setup as spot on as they can ahead of the Super Pole race later on, which will set the top 9 positions, of course, on the grid for race 2 a little later on this afternoon. It'll be very different conditions, as we were saying. The track temperature only 20 degrees at the moment as the sun comes up here in central France. Garrett Gerloff in the top 10 of the times as well. Another rider to experience frustration on the Kawasaki yesterday. Was on for one of his better results of the season. Was up in the top 10 largely thanks to that attrition, but he came sliding off through the left-hander at turn 3 as well and had to remount and eventually ended up retiring the Kawasaki. So more frustration for the American and what's been a slightly difficult season so far on the number 31 machine. Yeah, it has been a tough campaign, and yesterday we were able to see once again one of his favourite tracks. He's able to make that progress come through the group, but starting from the back of the field makes it very difficult to be able to do that. Yes, Garrett Gerloff of course took his only Tissot Super Pole on the BMW here 2 years ago at Manicourt, and that is Ryan Vickers on the Motor Corsa machine. And that's a crash for Vickers. You can see there the Union Jack flag on his front wing just damaged there, and shame for Ryan. That looks like it was maybe down at the 180 corner. That was at turn 8, I think, that he's come down. That's where the yellow flag zone is. So yes, the Moto Corsa machine has come down there. He finished in P13 in yesterday's race, still been learning his craft over the last year or two at World Championship level, Ryan Vickers, and picking up points as and where he can. He's got going again, so not too much damage for the Ducati. Still Toprak Razgatlioglu at the top of the times by 0.3 of a second over his title rival Bulliger. Now Bautista down in 13th at the moment. It has been a really disappointing weekend, it has to be said, for Alvaro Bautista, compounded by that lap 1 incident, but he has just not been on the pace all weekend. Yeah, and for Alvaro, it's another one of those weekends where you're looking at it and you're thinking of what might have been for him, but it's been a tough season and tough campaign, and needs to just find some way to get those results. Obviously the crash yesterday relegated him down the field and took away that opportunity, but he hasn't had the speed this weekend. Like you said, Dave, qualifying on the 5th row of the grid, down the order in free
practice as well.
Yes, he's been down the order all weekend. Unfortunately, the man who will move on to take Danilo Petrucci's seat at Barney Ducati next season will still have the support of the Ducati manufacturer. Of course, there is Jari Montello, as you mentioned. He will have that long lap penalty coming up in the second race later on, found to be the cause of that incident on lap 1 of yesterday's race. Axel Bassani, a little bit of a moment there, coming down into turn 15, this tricky final section of the lap on the second of the Bimotors. Hasn't really had the top end speed this weekend, was 7th largely due to attrition in yesterday's race.
Did well to qualify inside the top 10, and third time this year we've had both promoters inside the top 10 in Super Pro, but missed out on a lap at the end of the session, and that cost him a chance to improve.
Checkered flag has fallen on this morning warm-up session, with Toprak Razgatlioglu quickest at the moment. Sam Lowe's might improve here though on his final lap. He's a few hundredths up in the third sector, I should say.
Yeah, and in Super Pole yesterday, it was this final sector that cost Sam a bit of time as well. He was very fast in the first 3 sectors, so we'll see what his stop time is when he comes across the line and goes second fastest. Misses out in that final sector by just over 1/10 of a second compared to Toprak.
Niccolo Bulliger's yet to take the checkered flag as well. He's lost a couple of tenths in sector 2, so Toprak still on top with a 1:35.671. Lowe's 39 thousandths of a second down with that final lap of the session. Just waiting for the likes of Niccolo Bulliger, Jonathan Ray, Danilo Petrucci to come in here, but the remaining riders just making some practice starts, just doing final tyre checks as well ahead of the Super Pole race coming up a little bit later on. We'll see what Niccolo Bulliger can do, but he's lost 3/10 of a second in that third sector, so I don't think we're going to see any change in the rankings here at the end of this warm-up session. Bulliger will concentrate his efforts on the Super Pole race. It'll be a psychological advantage if he can get ahead of Toprak there, but he needs race wins, as we say, all the way pretty much from here on in if he's going to rescue the title.
Yeah, and we saw yesterday that he just didn't have the pace to go with Toprak, but he made a bad start again, and that's something that he needs to improve on, because Hungary was the same situation, and it just gave him that little bit of extra work to do, and you can't give Toprak that head start. But Bulliger struggled with both the front and the rear end yesterday for grip at different stages of the race, so just not quite got the balance he needs from the Ducati just yet.
So further work in the pit box needed for Niccolo Bulliger and his crew then, as the last few riders pull in to make their practice starts. Everybody has now taken the checkered flag, and it is Razgatlioglu who is quickest, ahead of Sam Lowe's by 0.039 of a second, less than a second covering the top 7. Good to see Remy Gardner in that top 7 as well, coming back after suffering a concussion which forced him out of the Hungarian round 5 weeks ago, the visit to Balaton Park. He's just behind Danilo Petrucci, and Jonathan Ray up there in the top 5 as well. He'll be fairly pleased with that, getting some pace back into the Yamaha after that disappointment of an early retirement yesterday. But it is Toprak who is quickest once again. Total dominance from him yesterday. He literally just ran away and hid from the rest of the field up front, keeping his head while everybody else was all over the place behind the world champion. It will be a fitting farewell to see him take another world title this year if he can get sufficiently clear of Niccolo Bulliger before he moves on to MotoGP for the 2026 season.